Risk Management Index. Disaster risk is the potential loss of life, injury, or destroyed or damaged assets which could occur to a system, society, or a community in a specific period of time, determined probabilistically as a function of hazard, exposure, vulnerability, and capacity. Risk Management Index, or RMI, is an index or measurement that measures the performance of risk management. So the main objective of RMI is to measure the performance of risk management. It measures how effective the risk management program is. This index is a qualitative measurement of risk based on the pre-established levels or targets or desirable reference or benchmarking toward risk management should be directed according to its level of advance. For RMI formulation, 4 components or public policies are considered. These are the 4 components. First one is risk identification, or RI. Second one is the risk reduction, or RR. Then disaster management, or DM. Governability and financial protection, that is AP. Here the estimation issues are mentioned. The estimation of each public policy takes into account 6 sub-indicators that characterize the performance of management in the country. Assessment of each sub-indicator is made using 5 performance level, that is low, insufficient, significant, outstanding, and optimal, that corresponds to a range of 1 to 5 scale, where 1 is the lowest level and 5 is the highest level. This methodological focus allows using each reference level simultaneously with the performance objective, and thus lets the comparison and identification of results or achievements towards governments should direct their efforts of formulation, implementation, and evaluation of policies in each of the cases. Once performance level of each sub-indicator have been evaluated through a non-linear aggregation model, the value of each component of RMI is determined. The value of each composed element is between 0 and 100, where 0 is the minimum performance and 100 is the maximum performance level. Total RMI is the average of the 4 composed management, 4 composed indicators that admit each public policy. When the value of RMI is high, the performance of risk management in the country is better. When it is low, so the performance is also in that level. So here the risk identification, or RI indicators, are: the identification of risk generally includes the need to understand the individual perceptions and social representation and provide the basic objective estimation. In order to intervene in risk, it is necessary to recognize its existence, dimension it, and represent it by means of models, maps, and indexes that are significant for society and decision makers. Methodologically, it includes the evaluation of hazards, the different aspects of vulnerability when faced with these hazards, and estimations as regard to the occurrence of possible consequences during a particular exposure time. The management of risk seen as a basis for intervention of relevant when the population recognizes and understands that risk. So the indicators are the RI1, that is risk identification indicator 1, that is systematic disaster and loss inventory, hazard monitoring and forecasting, hazard evaluation and mapping, vulnerability and risk assessment. RI5 is the public information and community participation. RI6 is training and education on risk management. These are the 6 RI indicators, and we have 6 indicators under each of the components we mentioned earlier. Here the second component is indicators of risk reduction, that is RR, and risk management aims to reduce risk. As we said earlier, in general it requires the execution of structural and non-structural prevention mitigation measures. It is the act of anticipating with the aim of avoiding or diminishing the economic, social, and environmental impact of potentially dangerous physical phenomena. It implies planning processes, but fundamentally the execution of measures that modify the existing risk conditions through corrective and prospective interventions of existing and potential future vulnerability and hazard control when feasible. So the indicators are here RR1 is risk reduction indicator 1, that is risk consideration in land use and urban planning. RR2 is hydrological basin intervention and environmental protection. RR3 is implementation of hazard event control and protection techniques. RR4 is housing improvement and human settlement relocation from prone areas. RR5 is updating and enforcement of safety standards and construction codes. RR6 or final indicator is the reinforcement and retrofitting of public and private assets. Then our next component is indicator of disaster management, DM, and here we can say that the disaster management should provide appropriate response and recovery post disaster, and depends on the level of preparation and operational institutions and the community. These public policies are set to respond effectively and appropriately when risk has been materialized and it has not been possible to impede the impact of dangerous phenomena. The effectiveness implies organizations' capacity and operative planning of institutions and other diverse actors involved in disaster management. So the DM indicators are DM1 is disaster management indicator 1, organization and coordination of emergency operations. DM2 is emergency response planning and implementation of warning systems. DM3 is endowment of equipments, tools, and infrastructure. DM4 is simulation, updating, test of inner institutional response. DM5 is community preparedness and training. DM6 is rehabilitation and reconstruction of planning. These are the 6 indicators here. The next component is indicators of governance and financial protection, that is AP. We can see that the governance and financial protection is fundamental for sustainability of development or sustainable development and economic growth in a particular country. This implies, on the one hand, the coordination between different social actors that necessarily are guided by different disciplinary approaches, values, interests, and strategies. Effectiveness is related to the level of interdisciplinary and integration of institutional actions and social participation. And on the other hand, the governance depends on the adequate allocation and use of financial resources for the management and implementation of appropriate strategies for the retention and transparency of disaster losses. So the indicators are AP is the governance and financial protection 1, AP1, that is inter-institutional, multi-sectoral and decentralizing organizations. EP2 is reserve funds for institutional strengthening. EP3 is budget and location and mobilization. EP4 is implementation of social safety nets and fund response. EP5 is insurance coverage and loss transfer strategies of public assets. EP6 is housing and private sector insurance and reinsurance coverage. So these are the these are the 6 indicators, and according on the base of these indicators and their evaluation methodology, as we discussed in the estimation phase, the final tables are prepared. This is a hypothetical table for country X, And here in the right hand side, the evaluation criteria, we can see that 80 and above is a very high performance. 40 to 80 means high performance, 20 to 40 means medium performance, and 20 or less than 20 is low performance for a country. So in country X, in terms of RMI RI, that means risk identification, the score is 12.93. So in terms of RI, the country X's performance is that is very low performance. In terms of RR, the country's performance is, we can see there is a medium performance, 30.22. So in terms of DM, the country's performance is high performance, because there is 50.08. So there is high performance. And in the last line, last row, there is RMI, that is the total RMI, which is found by adding all the three values and dividing by 3, because there are 3 values. And the total RMI is 31.08. So in terms of total RMI, the country's performance is medium performance. So in this way, we can interpret the table, and this table is just the extended version of the table that we already interpreted. In the same way, we can interpret country's performance in the year 2005 and 2010.